Hollywood loves to tell you about Michael Jackson the entertainer, the moonwalk, the glove, the music videos that changed MTV forever. But here's what they don't tell you. Between 1996 and 1999, Michael Jackson had a series of private meetings with Nelson Mandela that nobody talked about. Meetings that revealed a side of Michael the world never saw. A political side, a strategic side, a side that understood power in ways that had nothing to do with album sales. And there was one conversation between them that changed how Michael saw his own legacy. I'm about to show you exactly why these meetings mattered more than any award Michael ever won. And trust me, by the end of this, you'll understand why the entertainment industry worked so hard to make sure you never heard this story. Let's dive in. Let me paint the picture for you. In 1996, Nelson Mandela had been president of South Africa for 2 years. He'd spent 27 years in prison and emerged to dismantle apartheid and rebuild a nation. Michael Jackson was at a different kind of crossroads. He just released History, an album that was part greatest hits, part revenge fantasy against the media that was destroying him. Two men, two kinds of power, two completely different battles. But here's where it gets interesting. They'd actually met before, back in 1992, when Mandela was still building his political movement and Michael was still untouchable. That first meeting was ceremonial, publicized, safe. But the meetings that came after, the ones between 1996 and 1999, those were different. Those were private. Those were about something the public was never meant to understand. Now here's the kicker. These meetings weren't arranged through managers or publicists. They were arranged through Mandela's personal office, directly to Michael. No intermediaries, no press releases. Mandela specifically requested privacy. Think about what that means. Nelson Mandela, one of the most photographed political figures on earth, went out of his way to meet with Michael Jackson in private. This wasn't a photo op. This wasn't about celebrity endorsement. This was about two men who understood what it meant to be symbols, talking about the weight of that burden when nobody else was watching. But wait. Why would Mandela want to meet with a pop star in private? Here's what most people don't know. Mandela saw something in Michael that the Western media refused to acknowledge. He saw Michael's influence in Africa. Real influence. The kind that didn't show up in Billboard charts. In 1992, when Michael performed in South Africa, he drew crowds that rivaled political rallies. In countries where Mandela was working to build Pan-African unity, Michael Jackson's name meant something, not as entertainment, as connection. Mandela understood that Michael had access to African youth in ways that politicians never would, and he wanted to understand how that worked. Here's where it gets deeply personal. According to people close to both men, their first private meeting in 1996 lasted over 3 hours. They talked about childhood. Mandela had been separated from his children during his 27 years in prison. Michael had been separated from his childhood by Joe Jackson and fame. Two different kinds of stolen time. Mandela later told colleagues that Michael understood imprisonment in ways that surprised him. Not physical imprisonment, but the prison of global scrutiny, the prison of being a symbol instead of a person. Michael told Mandela something that stuck with him. He said the world had built a version of him that he could never live up to, and another version of him that he could never escape. Mandela understood exactly what he meant, but that's not all. The second meeting, sometime in 1997, that's when things shifted. This is when Mandela started asking Michael about power, not celebrity power. Political power. How to reach young people who'd stopped listening to politicians. How to use culture as a weapon against oppression. Mandela was watching his own country struggle with post-apartheid identity. The old generation understood the fight they'd won. The new generation, the kids born after apartheid, they needed something different. They needed vision. They needed culture. And Mandela believed Michael understood how to build that in ways traditional politics never could. This is where it gets interesting. Michael started talking about his own political awakening. He told Mandela about "They Don't Care About Us," the song that got him accused of anti-Semitism, that got banned, that the media used to paint him as dangerous. But here's what nobody reported. That song was Michael's most overtly political statement. It wasn't about dancing, it wasn't about romance, it was about systemic oppression. Michael shot 2 music videos for that song, one in a prison, one in a Brazilian favela. He was deliberately connecting American racial injustice to global poverty. Mandela got it immediately. He told Michael that the controversy around the song proved it was working. When power feels threatened, it attacks. Michael had never thought about it that way before. Now, here's where the story takes a turn. In 1998, Mandela invited Michael to a private dinner in Cape Town. Not a state dinner, a private gathering with anti-apartheid veterans, activists, people who'd actually fought the system. These weren't celebrities, these were revolutionaries, and Mandela wanted Michael to hear their stories. Why? Because Mandela saw something Michael hadn't fully realized about himself. Michael had power that could be weaponized for change, but he'd been conditioned by the entertainment industry to keep that power contained, to make it safe, to make it sellable. Mandela wanted Michael to understand that real power doesn't ask for permission. Here's the truth. During that dinner, Michael listened to stories about torture, exile, families destroyed by apartheid, and then one of the activists asked him a question that changed everything. They asked Michael why he'd never used his platform to directly challenge the American government. Michael didn't have an answer. He'd written songs, he'd donated money, he'd supported causes. But direct confrontation? That was the line he'd never crossed. The activists looked at him and said something Michael never forgot. They said, "You're more afraid of your own country than we were of ours, and we were facing death." Think about what that means. Michael Jackson, the biggest entertainer on the planet, was more afraid of the American media and government than South African freedom fighters were of apartheid. That moment shattered something in Michael. He realized he'd been playing by rules that were designed to keep him safe but powerless. Mandela saw the shift happen in real time. He later told colleagues that Michael left that dinner a different person, more determined, more dangerous in the best possible way. But wait, here's what nobody tells you about what happened next. After that 1998 meeting, Michael started planning something unprecedented. He wanted to create a global anti-poverty initiative that would bypass governments entirely. He wanted to use his fame, his money, his influence to build infrastructure in Africa that wasn't tied to Western aid organizations or political strings. He started meeting with economists, activists, development experts. Mandela was advising him behind the scenes. This wasn't charity. This was a direct challenge to how power worked. If Michael could prove that celebrity influence could build schools, hospitals, clean water systems without government approval, it would rewrite the rules. It would show that power didn't have to flow through traditional channels. Here's exactly how that matters. The entertainment industry noticed. Labels, managers, the whole machinery that had made Michael rich. They didn't want him anywhere near real political power. There's a reason celebrities are encouraged to raise awareness, but not build alternative systems. Awareness is controllable, infrastructure is not. By 1999, the people around Michael were actively discouraging the project. Too risky, too political, too likely to fail and damage his brand. And then came the allegations, the trials, the media circus that consumed the last decade of Michael's life. Coincidence? Mandela didn't think so. This is where it gets even better. The final meeting between Michael and Mandela happened in late 1999. Michael was already being buried by media scrutiny. Mandela was preparing to step down from the presidency. They met one last time, in private. No cameras, no witnesses beyond their closest confidants. According to people who were there, Mandela told Michael something that became Michael's anchor through everything that came after. He said, "They will try to destroy you because you refuse to stay in the box they built for you. This is not failure. This is proof you're doing something that matters." Now, here's the kicker. Mandela gave Michael a gift that day, a handwritten letter sealed with instructions not to open it until Michael felt completely defeated. Michael kept that letter with him for years. Nobody knows for certain when he opened it, but people close to Michael say he read it sometime in 2003, during the worst of the allegations. The contents were never made public, but here's what we know. After reading it, Michael stopped trying to defend himself in the media. He stopped playing their game. He started focusing on his children, his music, his private truth. Mandela had given him permission to stop fighting a battle he could never win and start living for something bigger than public approval. Let me break down exactly why these meetings mattered in ways that go beyond two famous people having conversations. First, they revealed Michael's political consciousness. The media spent decades painting Michael as naive, childlike, disconnected from reality. But Mandela, one of the greatest political minds of the 20th century, sought out Michael's perspective. That tells you everything about who Michael actually was behind the caricature. Second, they showed Mandela's understanding of soft power. He knew that culture shapes politics more than politics shapes culture. He saw in Michael a weapon against oppression that traditional activism couldn't replicate. Third, they exposed the entertainment industry's fear of politically activated celebrities. There's a reason these meetings were never publicized. There's a reason Michael's political awakening was buried under tabloid scandals. Here's exactly how to think about it. Nelson Mandela spent 27 years in prison and emerged to dismantle a government. Michael Jackson spent 40 years in the prison of fame and tried to dismantle the systems that control how we think about power, race, and culture. Different prisons, same fight. Mandela recognized that. He saw in Michael a fellow inmate who'd been conditioned to accept his cell. And he spent their private meetings trying to show Michael that the door was never actually locked. Michael just had to be willing to face what was on the other side. But wait, there's one more piece to this story that makes everything click into place. In 2009, after Michael's death, Mandela released a public statement. Most people remember the polite tribute, the celebration of Michael's music. But here's what most people missed. Mandela specifically mentioned Michael's commitment to justice and his understanding of oppression. Not his dancing, not his albums, his politics. Mandela was telling anyone who knew how to listen that Michael Jackson wasn't just an entertainer. He was a political figure who'd been deliberately neutralized. So remember those secret meetings I mentioned at the beginning, the ones that revealed a side of Michael the world never saw. Here's what actually happened in those rooms. Two men who understood the weight of being symbols talked about how to turn that weight into power. Mandela taught Michael that controversy isn't failure, it's confirmation that you're threatening the right people. Michael taught Mandela that culture is the language young people speak, and if you want to change the future, you have to speak that language fluently. They formed a bond that transcended fame and politics. They became mirrors for each other's struggles. And here's the truth that nobody in the entertainment industry wanted you to know. Michael Jackson wasn't destroyed by his eccentricity or his personal demons. He was destroyed because he started to understand his own power in political terms. He stopped being a controllable asset and started becoming a threat to systems that depend on celebrities staying in their lane. Mandela saw it happening in real time. He tried to prepare Michael for the war that was coming. And when that war consumed Michael, Mandela never stopped defending him. Not as a fan, as a fellow soldier who'd fought the same battle on different terrain. Michael Jackson's secret meetings with Nelson Mandela weren't about two famous people exchanging pleasantries. They were about power, oppression, and the prison of being a symbol in a world that demands you stay symbolic. Mandela unlocked something in Michael that the entertainment industry spent the rest of his life trying to contain. And Michael showed Mandela that revolution doesn't just happen in government buildings. It happens in music videos, concert stages, and the minds of young people who refuse to accept the world they inherited. So there you have it, the political side of Michael Jackson that nobody talks about. The meetings that revealed a man who understood oppression as clearly as any freedom fighter. The relationship with Nelson Mandela that proved Michael was never the naive child the media painted him to be. He was a strategic, politically conscious artist who scared the right people. And that's exactly why they worked so hard to make you forget. If you enjoyed this, make sure to like and subscribe for more content like this. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.